friends, host Derek here. Let's talk about people. I am in room one. Room one. Huh? I brought him from the basement. I thought I had lost them too. Anyhow, I'm live streaming. If you'd like to hang out with the rest of the talking with Fansfield communities currently live video chatting about unrelated matters, I'm sure they're in room two. You see there's 8 people there right now. I'm in room one, and I am covering the issue specifically of function mechanics. Yes, function mechanics. And I want you to know that you can get this document right here from twfpcollectibles.com by going to the PDF section, scrolling down to the bottom. Function Mechanics is currently on sale for $0. It means it's free. After the live stream's over, it will cost $2. Should also bring your attention to this fine service. I will give you a full consultation and assessment with a report, written report and stuff. $50. It's a good deal. It's gonna go up. It may go down first. Probably not though. I got another idea, which was I'd do it. Each one costs $5 more than the last one. Seems like a good idea, really. See what the ceiling is. Are you ready for function mechanics? That's the big question. That's what everyone wants to know. And there are 4 people who want to know. Stop censoring us and maybe we won't kill your heroes. Okay, I'll stop censoring you. You go ahead and keep on killing my heroes, though. Function mechanics part 1. So, like I said, you can get this PDF, and if you do, you'll see. Oh shit! Oh no! Oh, I did something wrong. God damn it! I need to format the page like this and then re-upload the PDF. For those of you who already have it, and you go like, "Hey, it doesn't fit right," well, you are correct. It doesn't fit right because I was an idiot. Anyhow, I'll fix that problem right now. Yeah. And then we'll go like this. 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 Yeah. Alright, so we're gonna. Nope, I don't want that. Yeah. Escape. I want this. Edit. Edit that product. I'm gonna edit the fuck out of this product. Oh yeah. You thought you were gonna get away with that, didn't you? Filthy little product. Well, instead, I'm gonna edit the living fuck out of you. And indeed, that's what host Eric did. From that day forward, he edited the living fuck out of everything. The end. Okay, well, you see how easy that was. You saw it. It was exciting, it was fun, it was easy, it was dumb. It was all those things and more. It was your favorite willing whore. I'm sorry for the poor language. That's how the poem goes. Okay, so back to function mechanics. Now that I've killed some time with some witty banter. Function mechanics, the engine of attentional scopes and manners by host Eric. Thanks for downloading this PDF. Function mechanics, the engine of attentional scopes and manners. What makes the human distinct from other life is a persistent identity that is both self-aware and self-changing. The human's ability to understand himself as defined an object is sometimes denigrated as the single self agent. But illusory or not, the notion that one's ontology functions as a unique object in the world is necessarily so, given the binary nature of the action we take. I kick you and I don't kick you are different outcomes, and the correlation between the behavior of I and the correctness of each sentence is 1-to-1, while the equivalent correlation between the status of you as kicked victim does not exist. To disavow instantiation of the autonomous and distinct self is to deny that an observational force precedes all. The distinction made by the word observer allows the single self to be, and limits each self to instantiation via that self's attentional habits and energies. Which is to say, you can't be anybody else but you. Element. So if we're talking about a system that parses out, make sure we understand how the different ways are that people pay attention, well, then what we're going to need to do is go over these issues of elements that we talk about. In other words, you can't just talk about one single whole, because to do so is to fail to parse out it meaningfully. So what are some of the elements we talk about? Fields, objects, experience, and agency. The intentional area is knowing, evaluating, impacting, and acting. Things that are known, assumed unchanging, and not subject to dispute. A physical object, like a rock, or a symbolic approximation, like a word. The impacting is the physical sensation and emotional sensation of the observer and or impacts to the field and or other things. This is kind of a weak definition here. I'm still meandering it out. But the thing is, the experience as we experience it is always subjective. It's always links back directly to the observer. It's what's happening to you right now. Agency. Acting, this includes the subject doing stuff in the physical world and creating stuff abstractly. So self-concept then is made of objects, words, and sentences that draw distinctions. Fields assume stabilities and frames. Experiences, real-time sensory and emotional impacts. And agency, the ability to both act physically, change the field, and to act metaphysically, change the objects. Now look, to act metaphysically, one necessarily is not unable to change the field. One changes the field by changing it into an object. And to act physically is not necessarily to change the field. It can be to change objects within the field. However, it should be noted that the field changes fundamentally in a way when objects within it are changed in the physical realm than it does in the metaphysical realm. Okay, now let's go to cognitive functions. Cognitive functions are like file transfer protocols that govern how each of these elements relate to one another within an individual to define that individual's nature and to drive that individual's behavior. The following things should be noted about fields, okay? Each observer manages many multiple fields, and everyone field switches often without thinking about it much. The reason we manage so many fields links to variance in the breadth and scope of an instance of attention, and to the physical world's strict adherence to the law of non-contradiction. No thing can both be and not be in the same time, space, and context. Kimberly, thank you. Subfields. A swimming pool, for example, is a field within a larger field of the physical world. Whatever you do in the pool, you do assuming you will be in water the whole time. You don't have to consider what you will do at the pool if it suddenly dries up. Main fields. So we can talk about there being main fields and smaller fields. Yes, somebody want to interject something?
Well, I would just ask if you can share the screen with us.
You can get the document here. I'll put the link here. This live stream has a corresponding companion document which you can get for free during the duration of the live stream, and after the live stream I will return it to its not on sale price, and it can be found. I'll get you the link. For those of you watching, you can see again if you missed the original mention of this whole thing. It can be gotten from right here in the at the Meow. So if you go to the store, twpcollectibles.com, you go to PDFs, you can find it there, or you can click the link that's in the description of the video, or if you're in this room here, you can click the link in the chat. If you're not in this room, you may come to this room and ask me questions if you wish, or listen, or say whatever. So, okay, so there's the PDF for you guys, and let me proceed by returning to the thing that the live stream watchers can see that the people in the room cannot see, which is this document that I'm looking at. Okay, so main fields. One's feelings, physical and emotional, comprise the field upon which actions and objects impact the observer. The physical world and placement of the objects within the world comprises another field. Conditionality is a third field, and non-physical objects interact with other objects, impacting the status of one of the other or both on the conditionality field. Otherness is the last of the primary fields, which is to say other agents, each of which is like a kind of like a galaxy within itself in the sense that it's a mishmash of competing vectors and stuff like that. But complete and whole within itself as an entity. So otherness is the last of the primary fields where impacts link indirectly to the subject via the displays of other people. We must also consider time as a vector. The final primary consideration to establish as a vector of function mechanics is time. It's not a field, but it's like a field, kind of. We can understand the attentional relationship with time in terms of frame rate. Matters that are wholly experiential have no discernible frame rate. Such extensionalities might seem unrendered or uncompressed, and thus ineffable for objective word-based purposes, or except insofar as they are approximate, I should say. Except insofar as they are approximate and useful as discursive objects. Okay, so concurrence. For matters that are wholly abstract, the frame rate can be anything up to, but not including unrendered. That is to say, TI. Okay. Lastly, ontology manifests some, but not all attentions concurrently, and this quality of concurrence is specific to a relationship between one manner of attention and another. So, whether or not you can use two manners of attention at the same time depends on which two manners of attention. All right, so let's look at these fields here. I mentioned there were four main fields. Let's look at them and what we can learn about them. One field is conditionality. All objects on the conditionality field are words, claims, symbols, and so forth. Non-objects are represented, of course, but as objects. Impacts on this field. Conditionality field operations change the status of other objects within the field, or change the status of aspects of the field to make those aspects into objects on a predefined field. TI values according to grammatical consistency, and that which can be falsified is seen as more real than that which cannot be falsified. Impacts on this field are not measured in terms of good and bad, but rather in terms of strength, weakness, validity, etc. Agents. Agents acting upon the field of conditionality can only act upon the objects and never the true field, logic. Although that never is a little teeny bit strong, but not really. Agents can use conditionality to act upon agents, provided those agents are willing to engage metaphysically. I'll repeat that sentence. Agents can use conditionality to act upon agents, provided those agents are willing to engage metaphysically. But the impact of ideas legitimized by a strict consistency is limited in regards to any specific person and their actual life choices. Also note that agents act upon objects by establishing claims and then warranting them. Still on the conditionality field, observers are excluded from conditionality calculi except to the extent that the observer's subjective interest or experience can be rendered into an object. It is presumed that with sufficient intelligence and neutrality, disinterested observers will agree. In other words, the arguments are presented as valid not because of the person who is making them on a conditionality field. The conditionality field attempts, introverted thinking seeks to make consistent various approximations of reality. So all the different valuing statements that people make and reasons people give. TI seeks to find consistency amongst them all and or parse out some of them as wrong. Okay, so let's go on to the space and experiential fields. But note here, a key thing that I'm not sure really got highlighted enough on this document is that the conditionality impacts objects. It relates to the interaction of objects with other objects. It excludes the subject from the equation, and to the extent that it can, it excludes experience. To the extent that it can't, it objectifies experience and renders it static, so that it can be about objects' interaction with other objects and changing the statuses of objects, metaphysical objects. So that's why it doesn't have a real time. I have updated my understanding of things as I've thought it through. I originally came into this with the notion that these things each had a physical and metaphysical aspect. My understanding of that has changed. TI has entirely metaphysical aspect, and I'll get into that further. It does play out in real time, obviously, but it doesn't have the same immediacy as experience because it necessarily is operating at a machine code level above physical. Okay, space and experiential fields. So space is the field that physical objects are objects in space and may also be conditional objects. For example, a carving of the word Joe is a physical object that expresses a conditional or a time object. Time objects probably a bad term for those. They're probably going to start calling them conditional objects because um, it's confusing. Anyway, impacts. A broken chair, a black eye, a finished wooden bookshelf. Space impacts change objects and fields in the physical world. Now, true fields in the physical world don't get changed much, but could in theory be changed, such as like gravity and shit like that. But arbitrary fields, or I guess you would call personalized fields, that is to say, the fact that you're in a swimming pool right now means that water is the field you're in. Certainly can be impacted by the behavior of action in space. So, to the extent that that shit happens in the field of space, it happens to objects and fields. Okay. Agents. Agents acting in space impact other agents, objects, observers, and the field, but they don't. Now, when I say they impact observers, I should say they impact. Yeah, well, they impact observers, which is to say agents as observing objects rather than as force vectors creating change. Anyway, agents acting in space impact other agents, objects, observers, and the field because, for the same reason I already indicated, agency in space impels either agency and conditionality, that is to say, making meaning about it, impacts and experience, that is to say, sensing or feeling something directly, or both. In other words, action forces change. Observers in space are impacted metaphysically only and thus impelled to make meaning. This making meaning may be as simple as noting the name of a thing or could be much more complex. Now, when I say observers in space are impacted metaphysically, observers as metaphysical objects are impacted, metaphysical objects in space in a representation of space, I guess, are impacted metaphysically only and thus impelled to make meaning. If the body is impacted, they may not be impelled to make meaning, although they may be, and that would, of course, cause them to experience, okay? So if the body is impacted, well, that's experience. Okay. So experience is that which gets rendered into objects may include objectification of personal involvement with other objects. In other words, I drink this soda. That is, I am making into an object my action of lifting up this can, drinking this soda for the purpose of giving an example of objectifying something that's being done as an action. But experience itself is fluid in real time. In fact, saying that I drink the soda does not make me actually drink it, or does it make me taste it. It's distinct from all the words I'm saying around it, describing what it was, what it did, and how it made me feel. Impacts: physical and emotional pain, comfort and discomfort, good flavor in your mouth or whatever. Actions and objects impact the subject directly without any need to be rendered into an object to be understood. In fact, they can't truly be understood once they have been rendered into objects. I can't truly understand the flavor and thirst quenchiness of this soda once I've described it as a flavor and thirst quenchiness. I can only understand it by drinking it. Agents. Action is a form of experience, and thus agency makes one of two experiential modes. The second is observation. In other words, you're either acting or you're observing. There's only they're not 1,000,000,000% on everything here. Okay, so just don't fucking everybody come down like a ton of bricks. People are gonna look at this thing and find this one word or something like that. But trust me, I'll figure it out. I'm not all the way figured out. It's mostly figured out. Observers as metaphysical objects in a representation of space are impacted. Oh, I said that one. Observation is a form of experience. In particular, observation refers to the metaphysical impact of that which is observed or experienced directly as sensation or emotional pain. In general, I'd like to try to draw a distinction between observation, that is to say metaphysical, and experience, which is to say physical, okay? But all such things are manners of observation ultimately. Observation is a form of experience. But, and vice versa. And vice versa. But let's call the metaphysical one observation. Okay. So there we go. Now that's done for that one. That was space and experience fields. Now let's talk about the otherness field. The otherness field is objects, the perceptions and emotional states of other people are the objects of this field, approximates the both symbolic representation and checks against the data stream. Data stream is basically stuff that you receive as sensory or data input from the outside world real time. Namely, seeing somebody smile or failing to see that sometimes might be the case. You might be instead paying attention to whether these things are organized properly. The link in otherness to the subjective lies in the individual interpretation of the social data provided by facial expression, tone, and so forth. Impacts. Actions and objects impact the object observer upon an egocentric field populated by equivalent observers and agents. So in other words, one maintains in one's metaphysical approximation of the physical world that one must have in order to continue to operate within the physical world across time rather than only in the moment. He says tangentially. Impacts to the self then are indirect by way of a comparison against the universal norm. Willful action taken on the otherness field seeks to impact the epistemological and or action fields within the observer-subject objects on the otherness field of the subject. I know that's complicated to follow, but it makes sense.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So there you recognize, like what I was saying the other day, with you necessarily acting in the physical world metaphysically, and even in the moment, you have to do that because you have to rely upon your memory and things like that, which are metaphysical objects that I'm rendering right now into my mind and recognizing. And so that would conflict with your, what? Was it the experiential one or the spatial one? I forgot. But, yeah. Like you were saying, no, like you sense in the moment, but you're an ENTP, so you make meaning out of what you're doing in the moment. Therefore, you don't recognize that you're actually doing something.
Well, no, I didn't.
But you just said people have to. Yeah.
Did I say you don't recognize you're doing something?
Well, you're doing something, but you're off in La La Land, basically.
No, I'm doing stuff metaphysically.
Right. So you're not totally in the physical world then.
Well, this is the thing. This is part one of the function mechanics. Okay, part two will go into greater detail about specifically. There's a flow of I guess ontology that goes. All right. Well, because for example, because one acts first, and one only can act in conjunction with a tool function. The action one takes is, let me look at these. I'm going to open up this. All right. Then the action one takes is constrained by introverted thinking, in my instance, right? And it's not just constrained by it; it expresses through that. So the extroverted intuition and the introverted thinking are incontrovertibly linked in some sense. Now, what that means is it's that combination of things that allows me to function normally, which is to say, while I act externally first, I link back to the subjective through an internal objective metric that provides legitimacy that affords my subjective expression of ontology. Everything obviously has to link back to the subject eventually, since no manifestation of self can be anything but a manifestation of that single human being enclosed by the name Joe or whatever, right? So
Mm-hmm.
all functions have to link back to the subject in some sense. The question is how directly they link back and the extent to which they impact, where their impacts land, and how agents exercise with those. And the relationship is between the extent to which, like epistemology functions, for example, they don't link to uh, they don't link to stuff the same way that action functions do, um, or that legitimizing functions like judging functions do, but instead they link to each other. So it's like if I have an action function first, I have to have after that an introverted judging function.
Mm-hmm.
If I have an introverted judging function first, I have to have after that an action function. And,
Right.
and if I have an epistemology first, I have to have after that an extroverted judging function. So the reason for this is because to successfully interface, to successfully complete a set of file transfer protocols with the data stream, let's say real-time stuff happening, I have to have file transfer protocols that allow me to interface with that data stream in one of a set possible number of ways. So, in other words, the data stream, as a human being, we don't just dip a bucket into the data stream and then spill out random manners of attentionally framed data. And the data without a manner of attention to frame it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't exist. Without the observer framing it through one or more frames, the data can't exist. In fact, the observation is what makes it data in the first place. Otherwise, it's just noise. So if I walk into a room and I'm focused entirely on the conversation between Joe and Sue, and I'm really raptly attentive to it, I'll probably not notice the dog walk in, drink some water from the bowl, and walk back out again. It's just noise to me. Now, if nobody notices it, it didn't happen. But of course, the dog noticed it, presumably.
Okay, so with like rendering experiences into objects, don't I do that real time? Don't I do that every single moment?
As close as possible, yes. The thing is, it can't be as real time as reality because it's not comprised of waves. It's made up of particles.
Okay.
Basically,
I mean,
it's not
fluid. Delayed, sure. Yeah.
So it's not like we're not super fast as TI. We can think and talk about as fast as we can think about as fast as we can talk almost, but probably not quite. I mean, most of us have to slow it down a little bit unless we're really sure about what we're talking about. In which case, then we can probably go, but I'm not responsive. I'm yeah, all that shit.
Yeah. But that's also a tactic to just throw out information so the other person can't catch it all. but I don't think you're doing that. But I'm just saying that people do that when they talk really fast. They're just they're just like, here's all this stuff, and you're not going to catch all the incorrect inconsistencies they have.
Okay. Well, and that's the thing. TI doesn't repeat all the time. We can't catch it all. We aren't that quick with it.
Yeah. Okay.
And FE is much more up to snuff in terms of real time on one level and not so much on another level. So in other words, Kimberly is very able to notice when I have a shift in mood. She probably, as she's learning which sort of like displays correlate with which shifts of mood, she stops to ask. She's kind of like stopped asking me about it as much, or just be like, "You're in a mood" or something. But if she doesn't get what a shift means, she'll ask me about it,
Well,
and because she's quite attentive to my mood. Go ahead.
So can we go back to the experience bit? So experience is fluid in real time, but then you say, therefore, it's not an object in and of itself. But aren't I making them into objects all the time? Else,
Yes.
I couldn't
Yes.
function.
In fact, you and me are making them into objects more continually and more thoroughly than any other types, except for INTPs.
Oh, that's what you were getting at. Okay, yeah. So that's why you mentioned the ENTP thing the other day. You were trying to get at that.
Yeah, because you see, we act metaphysically, and then we legitimize metaphysically, and then as our next function, we socialize, or relate to people, we motivationalize metaphysically, and then finally we know subjectively. So,
well, that's wild that other people don't think like that. If that's true,
it's hard to say. I think we're the most metaphysical, even more than INTPs, because even though TI is ultimately the purely metaphysical function, it's always paired with one of two action functions, and obviously paired with NE is like doubling down on the metaphysics, right? Think about ENTP, they don't have the subjective epistemology into the fourth function, which makes us the most metaphysical, the most lost in our heads, and the least connected to the physical world and our own bodies, and I mean not least connected to our bodies, but least connected to the realm of subjectivity. And that's not a good thing. People think that's a good thing. It means that um, long ago we forgot how to make the leap. Anyhow, let me finish this document. We're almost at the end of it, and then I will field more questions from people here and people who are in the live dashboard. I will get to your comments and questions. You can put them there. I will check that. Okay, so the otherness field is, what were they saying? So willful action taken on otherness grounds, that is to say, thank you so much for taking care of my kitty this time. That was so amazing of you. You are the best friend. Saying shit like that seeks to impact the epistemological and or action fields within the observer subject objects on the otherness field. The reason you do that is because you want to change the status of those objects within yourself so that when they go away, you go, aha, that really made her happy. I could see how satisfied she was that I was so appreciative of that. And I bet she'll do it again for me next time. So, in other words, willful action taken on otherness grounds seeks to impact the epistemological and or action fields within the observer subject object on the otherness field of the subject. If you can't actually impact them, you can only impact your representation of their fields within yourself in a way that actually has any meaning to you. And so that's why the distinction is there made. So said subfields are themselves objects within the self, rendering of the otherness field and the field rules value attainment, and the field rules and the quotes around that. And the field rules value attainment of universal norms as positive impacts and data stream consistency with expected desired out progress, or examples of consistency, said consistency as legitimate. Okay. So that just means that here's how FE decides something is legitimate. It decides because it says, okay, it compares against this universal norm of I want everyone to like me, I want everyone to think I'm cool. Yes, does that help me? People like me and think I'm cool? Yes, it does. Okay, well then it's a good idea. And then this other one where you go like, now I expect this to make everyone laugh, and then you check and nobody's laughing. That's data extreme inconsistency, and that's delegitimizing, and the old consistency is legitimized. Okay, so agents on the otherness field. Agents comprise one half of the other objects in the otherness field. Rather, agents comprise all of the objects half of the time on the otherness field. Observers take the other half of the time. Statuses, mantles linking to those agent observers that make up the other objects on the field. Observer is a status within the otherness field. Objects within the field, people, relate to the subject, you, and to other objects, various people, by way of agency, and parties are seen as flicking back and forth between playing the role of observer and the interchange between the two objects on the field. Language affords us no option but to assign the status of subject to one or more named field objects in the field, rendering that entity as observer, or alternately use rhetorical devices such as using passive voice to avoid naming the agent, or using abstractions linked to other abstractions by the verb to be instead. Reduce the event in question to, my cue is broken. Reduce the event in question to an action and to an impact, but not to a named agent. Okay, that's complicated. I want to go over it in great detail. You can read it yourself more slowly and get the gist of it. It's not that complicated, but it's just, I know it's like, I'm trying to describe stuff that requires very precise language and it gets a little dense, right? But if I could make a GIMP, I have a picture in my head. I'm not very visual at all, but I have a picture in my head of this field with circles on it that are changing color between black and white all the time. And then one of them is a little bit different color. It's you know, and it'll show you what I'm saying. It's not very complicated, but I have to figure out, I got to make that thing. Anyway, I want to check the live dashboard for comments, questions, stuff like that. And then I'll ask people here if they have any comments, questions. So this is, no, it's just this one person saying that thing that they said before. So I don't know, Bojo. First top censoriness, and then maybe we won't kill your heroes. Okay, whatever. He said that already. I already read it, and nobody else said anything since. That just goes to show you, Eric, nobody gives a fuck. Anyhow, I joke. Anybody in the room want to question, comment, concern themselves, or otherwise make words about stuff that I've heretofore said?
Only what I put in the comment.
Yeah?
That would be it. Yeah. I'm trying to take away pieces of this information that I could use in practical applications in life. That would be what I'm trying to do with this.
Well, there are such practical applications. Unfortunately, I think in order for its practicality to become clear, requires there to be a bit more of a. I have to finish some thoughts, I guess, that I'm kind of halfway through in that regard. But you're right. The current part is not very practical, and that's a good observation and correct observation about
it. Well, I was gonna question, like, whenever you finish on one thought and lead to another, I was gonna question for confirmation on how to understand it.
Okay. Did you? I don't know when you got here. Did you get the link to the PDF?
I did.
Okay.
So it's only when the conditional objects that we talk about. So, like, let's say, for instance, that there's some impact that we're talking about, and it's awful. And you say that we can't use good or bad, but it's the idea that if it was in the physical world and it was actually happening, that it'd be bad. But in and of itself, what we're talking about isn't bad. Is that what you mean?
You mean where it says conditionality that we don't use good or bad? Right. Well, impacts, we have objects called good and bad. We've got impacts that we refer to that are given the labels of good and bad. But that's not the impacts that are actually impacts on the conditionality field. Impacts on the conditionality field are those that have already resolved one way or the other. In other words, valid, invalid, good argument, bad argument, not the, you know, like sound argument, unsound argument, not like
I still say good and bad can be used for that.
Yeah, it can, but what I'm trying to make a distinction of is that it's that because of the nature of conditionality, it's not supposed to be. Um, well, it doesn't link to you directly. Winning the lottery is good. Getting arrested is bad. Being, making valid arguments is good. Making invalid arguments is bad. It means something very different. You're really trying to say the argumentation stands on its own or it doesn't, regardless of who made it. If somebody says, "Here, I wrote 6 example arguments," can a bunch of experts come and tell me which ones are valid and which ones are invalid? All the experts will agree, or assuming they're simple, straightforward arguments.
Right.
And it won't matter who made the argument.
What does that have to do with good and bad being used?
Well, because when we talk about good and bad about ideas, words, objects, and stuff like that, what we're really talking about is the NI quality of rightness or fitness. Good and bad, though, are not intended to cover that issue of rightness or fitness, but they're intended to cover morality, ethics, and personal sensation experience. In other words, that tastes good, that tastes bad, or that feels good, that feels bad, or that's morally good, morally bad, ethically right or wrong. Normally, for something like,
But those are fittedness too. Like I think they're all interrelated to one another.
okay, I mean, you're right. The distinction I'm making there is not a strong one. Um, I would suggest that good and bad don't apply to one's conclusions about logical argumentation. In other words, my conclusion about whether something is valid or invalid, the words good and bad don't help me at all in that context.
Okay. I just assumed you were saying, like, if we pass this law, 1 million babies will die. Like, the million babies didn't die on the conditionality field, because we haven't even enacted a law in the physical world yet to even have a passage of time and then the babies dying and whatnot. That'd be in the physical world, and then we could say that's bad, right?
Okay.
I thought that's what you were getting at, and you were saying on the conditional field, just talking about it,
No,
that impact isn't
I'm
bad.
talking about arguments that are bad because of the nature of the
Right.
argument.
But it's just within the impact column, so I was just wondering.
It doesn't necessarily change the correctness of it. That should be noted as well. That I could say, all humans breathe. I breathe, therefore I'm human. It would be everything there is true, but it's an invalid argument because even though all humans breathe, and even though I breathe, I cannot conclude necessarily that I'm human because not only humans breathe, other things breathe as well as humans. And if the only attribute you know about me is that I breathe, then there's no reason for you to necessarily conclude I'm human more than I might be a dog or a cat or something else. So that's an example of how something can be correct, or in other words, consistent with our normal understanding of things, and still not valid in its argumentation.
I just thought by impacts you meant, like in an argument, you would say these would be the impacts of doing this thing that you're saying we should do.
Right. So I mean, those kind of impacts, and that's the thing is TI models itself sort of and generates impacts. Okay, so it's 6:15. That means I've got 15 more minutes of this live stream that I've told Kim I've been doing for about an hour. Okay, do you have any thoughts from the individual who's below me in the on my screen anyway, who has blue straps over her shoulder? You have anything to say? Any thoughts? Stuff is different from other stuff. Good point, Kestrel. Wise words. Okay, well, I guess no thoughts from here. Let me check the dashboard, see if anybody has any thoughts from there. Still no thoughts from here. Don't worry, folks. I will explain further anyway. So, to go further, a little further into function mechanics, the thing to note is that basically, if you're acting in the physical world, you're impacting in certain kinds of ways. And if you're acting in the metaphysical world, you're impacting in other kind of ways. Basically, the dichotomy is between doing stuff and talking about stuff. But things like this live stream kind of bridge the gap because both perceiving functions have aspects, which is to say they have to have slightly different manifestations when they're functioning in real time than when they're functioning across time. SE has to be able to attend beyond the moment in real time. So it needs to be able to act in ways that incorporate the future and the past. TI, when paired with SE, is going to be paired with either the physical aspect of SE, that is to say, TI will be expressed through and analyzing how action impacts the field and the objects within the field that the subject distinguishes as separate from himself, or it will be prioritizing the metaphysical aspect, which is to say how he affects, how TI interacts with action. TI will judge how action across time proves consistent with expected outcomes. Now, no, it doesn't prove consistent with how those outcomes are attained, just the consistency with those outcomes, which tends to make ESTP especially a little bit impulsive in a slightly sociopathic fashion, especially with polar FI. And the TI, when it goes to interact with the perceiving function, its dominant perceiving function of physical action, it interacts with that physical action in ways that turns it into objects of consideration in ways that they fundamentally don't resonate with intuitives. ISTP, in contrast, thinks first. So they've likely got a bag of reliable known realities that they turn to again and again. Of course, the ISTP with SE second acts that stuff out in a different order, so to speak, than the ESP. But regardless, the perceiving functions SE and NE and SI and NI have aspects to them, which is to say they function differently when they are functioning in real time than when they are, in other words, when they are attending to what's in front of you than when they are attending to objects in your head. Okay? So NE, SE, NI, SI, they all have two aspects to them. If I'm any physical aspect, I can do it sometimes. It's not very fun for me. I do it sometimes anyway, which is you start playing with shit. I'm gonna try to make this thing stick onto this thing, and I'll turn it this way, blah, blah, blah. That's any physical aspect. I'm terrible at it. Any metaphysical aspect is much more natural for any user. It's going to be this stuff, ideation. Okay. SE, physical aspect, stuff like fighting and walking across the room and slapping some girl on the ass and being the bold person who takes advantage of opportunities. Donald Trump seems to have both physical and metaphysical aspects, right? Well, ISTPs are much more likely to have the physical aspect of SE as an absolute priority, and the physical aspect of SE, metaphysical aspect of SE as an absolute priority, and the physical aspect as a instrumental priority. So if we think of each of these values as being either absolute or instrumental, the perceiving functions alone have these things. Now, each of the judging functions has a distinct profile regarding its relationship between objects, subjects, and time as a vector, and other things like that, which will all be covered in part 2 of this live stream, a 2-part live stream event, maybe 3-part. I don't know, probably 2 parts. I'll probably be done after that. I certainly am. I'm just trying to get it down. I'm trying to get it right. I'm trying to make this thing fucking perfect. And when it's done and it's as perfect as I can fucking get it, everyone's gonna go, "Damn, Eric, you really tried hard. You did. You weren't fucking around. You didn't half-ass it." That's what everyone's gonna have to say because I'm not fucking around and I'm not half-assing it. So, any comments or thoughts from anybody? I'm getting scouts in the niceness coordinator. Must mean I have bad FE. My bad. Sorry.
That was fantastic, Eric. Nice job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think you're already putting effort forth in what you're trying to put
Life change
for us. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
That's why I'm here.
I am chilling for a couple more minutes. If anybody else has any comments, or if you guys want to comment more, I'm not saying not you guys. I'm saying if anybody from this thing wants to comment, you've got a couple minutes left. Thank you, Mark, to ask questions and whatnot. I'm saying thank you to Mark Anderson in this particular instance, who I guess is probably not you.
No.
You're not host Mark. Your first name is not host.
That's right.
And, incidentally, you are the only not host we have. Hadra, I don't know. What time did you get here? Hadra's busy.
What was the question? I just got here.
You just got here. That's the question. You just get here? Yeah.
Yes, I just got here.
Okay. Well, yeah, boy, did you miss some excitement. The new girl in the bottom corner here made not host Mark cry.
Tear ducts ran dry.
Wow, that's intense. My new person.
Using the metaphysical SE to just slap me around.
I tried to elicit voice commentary from new person, but thus far to no luck. Likely, she's saying, I'm going to save that one for a more important occasion.
When did you first conclude that there might be physical and metaphysical aspects to those functions?
Well, I think Kimberly is the thing that really kicked into gear for me because of the dramatic distinction between Kimberly's expression of SI and my mom's, even though both things are SI. So, you have a basket that's filled with eggs, and you got a basket that's filled with apricots, you got a basket filled with apples. Sometimes, most of the eggs are like kind of whitish, ovally things, but some of the eggs are like kind of weird, misshapen, kind of spotty things. And you go, is that really an egg? And you go, yeah, it's an egg. It's just an egg in that basket. And I mean, it's like it's in the egg basket. Clearly, it doesn't go in any of the other baskets. It's just kind of a weird looking egg compared to the other eggs in the basket. But compared to other things, it's definitely an egg. Well, the thing is, Kimberly expresses a much different kind of looking egg than my mom if you focus on the primary expression of SI, which is to say Kimberly is much more about the taking baths and being comfortable and not overextending and getting enough rest and not letting yourself get hungry and not letting yourself get thirsty, keeping hydrated, all that kind of shit. She's much more about the physical body aspect of SI. My mom was much more about let me make metaphysical lists of everything. Like, okay, and then don't forget it's Saturday at 1 p.m. We're gonna do this, and let's go over your schedule again. And then when we're driving in the car, my mom would be like, I'd hear her talking to herself. Okay, so then when I get home, I gotta call Judy, and then after I call Judy, I need to clean up in the living room. After I clean up in the living room, then I think, I gotta check out Eric's backpack, and I'll do that. And did I remember to call Claire? Oh my god, like that, right? So Kimberly is very similar and yet strikingly different color of the same creature,
I figured it was SI you're looking at because I think that's the most obvious distinction to be observed, at least.
Right.
I think.
But then I understand the NI distinction as well. I understand also second in the epistemological aspect of it, which is I got one day an example in my own life of real-time physical NI, which is I processed a bunch of different aspects of a complex system and realized it's time to swerve out of the way even though nothing's happened yet. Right? So that's NI, and it said, I processed all these elements of the system without you being able to figure them out because it was too complicated. You needed to know faster than you could figure it out. The system had too many fluid elements. You couldn't consciously use conditionality and go, okay, well, if this car goes over there, then this car moves this way, then this car will be forced. You can't do it like that because it'd take too long. You'd be dead if something did happen. Something that my NI was either wrong or my parents on the side of him alerted him to my presence. One of the two.
Cool.
All right, so that was the other aspect of it that I already understood that how NI worked in the real time in conjunction with SC. We have to have NI to be an animal. It has to pre-know for us to act instinctively. It's like between receiving the sensory data and processing it all, that's where NI lives. And that's where NI leaves because I am going to call it an evening here on Talking with Trans People. Thank all y'all so much for watching the live stream and being here to see me in the room and or asking questions or commenting on the dashboard. And I am going to go, as soon as I get off of this thing, I'm going to update this function mechanics PDF with the most updated one and switch it over to off sale. So if you want to grab it real quick before I do that, and you can grab it for free. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.